that I really loved in the Codex Alera series, and there were lots of things that I really didn't love. So we're gonna do a little compliment sandwich type structure here. First, something that I liked. I really loved the main character, Tavi. Whenever we got to a Tavi narrated chapter, I was excited because his plots were always really good. I loved his character. I loved that he loved problem solving and that he was always trying to innovate and make things better. He was just such an active character that he didn't often just let things happen to him. He was always trying to get one step ahead of the problem. And that's like so refreshing to have such a active main character. A+, Tavi's the best. Love him. Something I didn't like also has to do with Tavi, and this is like when I first started reading and he's the only character who doesn't have the magic, and I was like, oh, this trope again. TV Tropes even has like 2 whole pages describing this trope called The Call Put Me on Hold, where you're in a society where everyone has the magic, but you don't have the magic and you're all sad. But then it turns out you're the chosen one after all, and you'll be even stronger than everyone else in the magic. So as soon as Tavi got introduced, and he didn't have the magic, but he was obviously an awesome main character, and I was like, oh, one of these books again. And Tavi's gonna be like in the big climax, and then suddenly gain powers, and he's gonna be the best, and everyone's like, wow, you're the chosen one after all. Anyway, I'm done with this trope. I want a new story. So when Tavi was first introduced, I really liked him, but in my heart, I was just dreading the moment where we would get to the climax, and he'd suddenly bust out with the best powers ever. But we got to the end of book 1. Tavi still doesn't have Fury crafting. Like, I started to hope that Jim Butcher might pull it off and, like, not go down this trope road and instead forge new trails. Tropes aren't necessarily bad things. Like, these get popular because they're so fun to watch. It's fun to watch our underdog character who doesn't have the magic get the magic. However, they also are tropes because they've just been overused. And then, throughout book 2, I was like, okay, it's probably this book where he gets his magic powers, and then there was the climax of book 2 where he's in the room in the palace, and all of his friends are unconscious, and a big Kane comes in to attack him, and there's no way he could win, and in my mind I was just so ready to roll my eyes, like, okay, here's the point where he gets powers, and turns out he's the chosen one, and then he doesn't! And then he defeats the Kane without any Fury crafting, and I was like, what? And that is where I really, really started to, like, hope and believe that this was actually going to be Tavi's story, that he was never going to have Fury crafting, and he was going to have this new journey that I hadn't really seen that much. And then I got to book 4. Now he has Fury crafting. And it just keeps progressing, and now he's the best at Fury crafting. Okay. And it wasn't unsatisfying while it was happening. I think I just really didn't like it because I could see where it was going from, like, the moment Tavi got introduced. And I was so hoping that it'd be something like new and refreshing and different. And then it wasn't. I do appreciate that Tavi got his Fury crafting, like, off screen. It just opens in book 4. It's like, by the way, I've been Fury crafting a little bit for the last 2 years. Like, that's nice, because at least it didn't happen in the climax like I was dreading. Something that I loved, Katai and Tavi's relationship. What is their ship name? I want to know it. I love how their relationship grows over the series. They start out kind of like this real rivals, and then it progresses, and it's so beautiful that they slowly become closer and closer through the books. I love that their relationship has so much depth, and that they have such great chemistry. They're really fun to watch. Like, ship Tavi Katai forever. A+ there. I love the scene in book 2 where they kind of pledge themselves to each other, and Tavi finally realizes that, like, Katai is bonded to him. Oh, it's so good. Something that I didn't like, the kind of lack of internal conflicts for characters. Now, there are characters who have internal conflicts, and those are the great moments of these books. But for the average character in the average book, they don't really have an internal conflict at all. Like, they have external conflicts, which are super interesting and well done, but then, like, internal conflict is just like, no, they're not at war with themselves at all. Take Amara. She has little internal conflicts, like, should I marry Bernard? And that is a nice plot. I liked it. But then in the average book, Amara doesn't really have an internal conflict. At one point, she decides she doesn't want to work for the First Lord anymore, but it's just a sudden moment, and then she doesn't really, like, have to return to that. She's just made her decision, and she's final with it, and we don't get to see any angst. I want the angst. Probably that's why I like the character of Asana, because she seems to have the most internal angst. A+. Fidelius, I also appreciated, but was kind of disappointed, because he switches sides from the First Lord side to the Rebellion side, back to the First Lord side, and he doesn't really have that much internal conflict through any of it. He's always sure of his decision. He's like, yep, the right thing to do to defect, and then maybe he has like a little thought, and he's like, oh, never mind, like, it's fine, I'm sure. And then when he goes and serves Tavi, like, he's like, yep, I'm sure I'm gonna die for this, but like, it's the right thing to do, and I'm gonna do it, and there... Where's your angst, Fidelius? Like, he's worried about getting caught. He's worried about what Tavi will think of him, but he's not worried that he made the right decision. And I really was craving some more indecision and some more angst from these characters, and very few of them have satisfying internal conflict plots. A good thing is the amount of switching through POVs. There's a lot of series that don't do this very well when they have a big cast of characters and then the pacing in which they switch from one character to another feels kind of off, like you're really enjoying one plot and then suddenly you're like pulled out of it to a plot you didn't want, and then like you're in that plot for too long and then you get back to a good plot and you're in it for too short, and like it's a mess. For Codex Alera, I never felt like the pacing of the switches of the point of view was off. It always felt like by the time it switched to a new character, I was ready for it to switch, and then the character that it switched to was always like, yeah, I'm interested in them now. Like, it was very well done, switching from different storylines and different POVs. Something that I didn't like, plot armor. So, I was expecting, because there are so many main characters, so many main POVs, that we would get some deaths. Because if there's only one character that's narrating your entire story, it's pretty unlikely that the character is going to die until, like, the very last chapter. They kind of have this plot armor that the plot can't hurt them too hard. However, when we have all these different POVs, it's possible to kill any of them off at any time, right? Like, I was excited for that. It made the moments more suspenseful for the first two books, because it was like, oh no, Tavi might actually die, because they could just pick up Amara as the main character or something. Like, it was some real intense suspense because the main characters seemed like they don't have plot armor. And then none of the main characters died, except some villains, but you expect that anyway, so like, it kind of felt cheap. Like, there was this great opportunity to heighten the stakes by occasionally killing off a POV character, so you're like, oh, POV characters are actually in danger, but then by the last book, when Aaron died, I was like, he's not really dead, he's a POV character. I'm like, is he really dead? And then it turns out he wasn't dead. It's like, oh, yeah, I was right to just assume it was fake, because it was. And that is nice that these books don't get like super dark and kill off everyone, because those books are just sad. But also, I would have liked killing off the occasional POV characters so we could add some suspense for the remaining POV characters. Kind of like no one is safe kind of mentality. A positive thing, plot. Okay, the plot in this book is like engrossing. Not every single subplot I was always in love with, but I liked all of them, and I was in love with many of them. The plot makes you want to keep reading. No matter what the other failures of this book is sometimes, the plot is there and beautiful, and even if you aren't wondering if the characters are going to win or not, you are wondering how the characters are going to win, and that is something that like, ooh, I was craving so hard. Very well done. I like the payoffs, I like the setups, I like the executions. Amen. Something that I didn't like, the way that the magic system was explained in like books 1 and 2. It took me to the end of book 2 into book 3 before I finally really understood how Fury crafting worked. It just, it was so confusing. In book 1, it was like, wait, so do you only get one element? But that person has 2 elements. Okay, I guess you can have 2 if you're like super special, but maybe not. But then, like, Tavi doesn't have Fury crafting, but then kids don't have Fury crafting. But then, if you only have one element, but then you don't have fire, how do you operate, like, the Fury crafted fire lamps? And, like, wait a minute, what? Like, confusing. It's fine. This is fine. But definitely, I would have appreciated if book 1 had walked me through Fury crafting a little bit better. Not all at once, like an info dump, but, like, help me understand. Because when I got to book 2, and then there were, like, the nobles flinging around all of the elements, I was like, wait, I thought it was like max 2, unless you were the first lord. Like, what is happening? Can everyone learn all of them? Like, do you just have to collect the right Furies? How do you attract a Fury? But, on the plus side, it wasn't an info dump. Something that I did like, though, world building. That you could really feel that the Marat and the Kane and the Icemen all have their own cultures that are distinct from the Alerans. Okay, something that bugs me the more I think about it is like, what is this book series about? Like, what is the big theme and the moral and the lesson of the story? Because a story doesn't need to have a moral and a lesson to be good, but also this book seems to be trying to tell you something. If you would just judge it by, like, the ending, it's that it doesn't matter what circumstances you were born into, you can still be great. Which is a great theme, but also not really supported by all of the books. Like, there's some subplots about how slavery is bad, but also they don't come up that often, and it's just like, yeah, slavery's bad. I don't know. It just felt like something that was always tacked on whenever the slavery thing came up, because it didn't really factor into the main plot that much. Whoops. And then, but from, like, Tavi is the most confusing linchpin of these themes, because he doesn't fit any of them super well because of the conflicting... It's because he didn't... Okay. Imagine that this instead had been Tavi's story. He doesn't have Fury crafting, but he still rises through the ranks and becomes totally awesome, and by the end of the series he still doesn't have Fury crafting, but he's still the First Lord because everyone recognizes that you don't have to have Fury crafting to be awesome anymore. And then he can pave the way for other people like bastards and slaves. Like, that is such a beautiful story and message that seems to be building up in books 1 through 3, that just because you don't have the traditional magic, you can still be valuable to society. It's like a message about it's okay to be handicapped. It's okay to be different. But then it turns out Tavi is, like, part of the royal bloodline and super powerful anyway, and it just undermines its own theme that it has been building about Tavi. I was hoping so hard for a wonderful story about triumph because of and in spite of handicaps. But then we got a story instead about someone who was born into power and then came into that power, and yes, because of the time without that power, he was a little better, but then, like, you know, it really was the Fury crafting that saved the day, not his ingenuity that much. Like, a little, but mostly just his awesome Fury crafting. Okay, this is my favorite fun fact about Codex Alera that I found when I was researching for this video. Apparently, once upon a time, someone told Jim Butcher that you can't write an awesome story out of lame ideas. And Jim Butcher was like, no way, I could do it. You name 2 bad ideas and I'll make an awesome story out of it. And then the person named The Lost Romantic Legion and Pokemon. And those combined to give us Codex Alera, which is so beautiful. And once I heard that, I was like, yeah, I see it. Like, and I wish someone had told me that fun fact before I had read the books, because I think I would have, 1, enjoyed the Roman influences even more, and 2, better understood Fury crafting from the beginning. So, in conclusion, I thoroughly enjoyed reading these books, but I didn't enjoy every part of these books. They're super fun to read, and I totally binged them, and I enjoyed every moment of the books, of the audiobooks that I encountered, but also inside those moments were littler moments where I went, oh, this trope again. Oh, that's really confusing. Even as I was enjoying the prose and the plot, I was not enjoying other parts. Not every book series is perfect. Codex Alera may be like a solid B book.